is very dangerous, right? Because then you always get in the mode of saying yes to figuring it out later. You will figure it out later. I do believe that, right? And I do believe that the universe is rigged in my favor, and that like life is always happening in my favor also, right? So nothing bad ever happens. It's either a lesson or an opportunity, but there's always a silver lining in it at the end of the road for me. But that also comes with having to understand that if you say yes and try to figure it out later, and the people around you are not able to say yes, then ultimately all the shit falls back on you.
That's right. That's a great
right?
point.
So really be mindful of, you can say yes and you can figure it out later, but what does your support system look like, and can they handle it?
Welcome to the Hassle-Free RE Podcast, a real estate podcast where we bring you stories, education, and tips for investors and real estate enthusiasts. If you're interested in investing in real estate or just want to keep a pulse on what's happening in the market, then this podcast is for you. Thanks so much for listening and tuning in. If you enjoy our show, please make sure to subscribe and give us a 5-star review. We'd greatly appreciate it.
Hello and welcome to the Hassle-Free RE Podcast. I am your host, Dave Menapace, and unfortunately, our co-host could not be here with us today. She's taking care of the little one, Logan, and when he's older, maybe he'll take this podcast over. But for the time being, I am joined here by a really amazing mentor of mine. His name is Emanuele Pani, also known as E. He was born and raised in Sardinia, Italy, and came to America at 15 to fulfill his American dream. He's a real estate expert and entrepreneur with experience in investments, real estate sales and acquisitions, and professional Airbnb hosting and management. He's the co-host of the STR Secrets, a podcast that focuses exclusively on the short-term rental industry, as well as being one of the partners in Domu Private Investments, a rapidly growing investment group that focuses on investing in Middle America. In his free time, Emanuele enjoys traveling, reading, learning, cooking, working out, and spending time with his wife and pets. So without further ado, E,
What's
why
up,
don't you fill in any gaps and take it away, man?
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for having me. I am sorry Kim is not here. And it's funny because last week I had to reschedule last minute because I had a broken car. So I joked, I'm like, did Kim also get a broken car? Because that would have been hilarious. But she's taking care of Logan, which is much more important. But yeah, man, it's always funny to hear the bio, because coming to the States feels like such a long time ago. And it was, right? Like I was 15, 16.
Right.
And I don't know where the time has gone though, because I'm like, I still look back, I'm like, I just got here. But not quite. So it has been quite the journey. And yeah, man, I've done a lot of things in the real estate space. So I am looking forward to kind of sharing that with your audience, and hopefully somebody gets not so much inspired, but maybe we can help them avoid some walls that are in their near future. And we can just help them be like, okay, around this bend, there's going to be a wall. Maybe slow down a little bit, take your time, right? And see how we can help people. So yeah, I'll let you kind of lead the way.
Yeah, I love it. Well, yeah, let's use your story as sort of the backbone of our discussion here. What I'd love to do is start way back, kind of like right as you were graduating college, looking for something to do, and really sort of take us to the beginning of your real estate journey.
Yeah.
We'll bring folks current, and we'll have some fun doing it over the next hour.
Cool. So I graduated with a degree in accounting and finance, right in the middle of the last financial recession. And I didn't really have any big plans to be in finance, but I always liked money. So I'm like, well, great, I'm going to become a wolf of Wall Street, right? And just make money. So I went to school in Geneva, Switzerland, where there's more banks than people. So I'm like, hey, this is going to be a great spot for me to live and work in once I have this little piece of paper. Fast forward to being done, have the little piece of paper. I look around, and the banking industry was pretty much in shambles. Nobody was hiring. And so my mom and sister were living in Boca. My little sister used to play tennis at the Chris Evert Tennis Academy, which is one of the big tennis academies. And I kind of went back home to my mom's house and didn't really know what to do. I was kind of lost, really, right? Like, you're like, oh, I'm going to go to work on Wall Street. And they're like, that's not a thing. I'm like, okay. So my second major was accounting. I tried to do one accounting season. That wasn't for me. I realized that the only thing that I hated more than going to school to be an accountant was actually trying to be one, right? I'm like, this is not, I can't, right? I can't, like, this is not going to happen. So at the time, my mom and sister living next to the academy, we were living in a fully furnished apartment. And I graduated and I went and I was like, went to the office, to the leasing office. And there was a gentleman by the name of Hanan Benavi, which then became my very first real estate mentor. And he's Jewish. And so as I went there to talk to him about something wrong with the apartment, he's like, oh, you're not Maria's son. I was like, yeah. And he's like, what? Do you want to work weekends? Because from Friday night until Saturday night, I cannot answer the phones, I cannot answer emails and anything else. I was like, sure. And so that was my start in real estate, right? I was the weekend guy, then became the maintenance guy, then became the manager of the courtside villas. And very lucky for me at the same time, Hanan was going through a big kind of restructuring of his own life. He was getting a divorce, wanted to move back to Israel. And so I was kind of in the right place at the right time. And so when he decided to get a divorce finally and move back to Israel, he decided to sell me the short-term rental business. So that was the management business. So at the beginning, I had some units that he's like, look, you're going to have to buy some of the units. I'm going to co-sign for you. I was 22 at the time. I just came to the States, so I had no credit, no nothing. I'm going to co-sign for you this loan, and then you're going to buy the management business as well. And then, so the management business was a combination of sublease or arbitrage, as people call it now, and then management units, plus the ones that we had. So I was 22 at the time. I had no clue. Like, right? I was like, yeah, he's been doing it. I kind of been doing it with him. How hard can this be? How hard, right? How hard? Come to find out, it is a little difficult, right? To go from just managing 40 units for somebody else to being the only person managing units, and not really, and you and I kind of can really relate on this, not being a system person, not being a operations person, but just being a talker and somebody that can sell, and very much a people pleaser as well. So I can handle clients, I can sell the property, but I had no time to work on the system. So for the longest time, I ran the Courtside Villas, which is a 4-unit apartment complex, on an Excel spreadsheet and taking credit cards over the phone, writing them in little notepads, sticky notes all over my agenda, right? And I had a very simple, very advanced system on my agenda. Green name plus unit number meant somebody was checking in, and red name on the agenda with unit number meant somebody was checking out. And that was my systems.
It was a system, though. It was a system.
Yes, like the most basic of systems, but yeah, it was a system, right? Fast forward 12 years later, we now own all 40 units at the Courtside Villas. My wife, Tasha, came into our business a couple of years ago and really helped us create all of the systems that we now have. So now we use a property management software. We use Breezeway to really help with quality control. We use dynamic pricing softwares. So I've learned a lot also through hosting a podcast with Mike. I've got the chance to learn a lot of the industry leaders and see a lot of great people with great products that really own their little part in the short-term rental industry to really help you maximize and optimize your listing. So yeah, that is kind of like the vacation rental story.
Right. Well,
We then,
and I'd love to, can I rewind it just a tiny bit?
yeah,
I,
of
I
course.
want to like pick out these little pieces because we covered a lot of ground there. And I know there's so much more even outside of that to the story itself. But let's go all the way back to so you move in with your mom and your sister
Mhm,
into the Courtside Villas.
mhm.
Obviously, you're like, okay, finance isn't the direction that I want to go.
Yep.
What initially got you to say, heck, I'm going to go down to the leasing office and just have a discussion with them? Like,
Oh, the TV was broken.
boom.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like that's what I tell people all the time. It's a very I was very lucky, and it just I didn't know what I didn't know,
Yeah,
and I didn't over stress about it in a way
right.
that I do now, right? Like I think with age and time, there is a natural occurrence of like you just start worrying more, right? Like
Right.
what
Right.
if this happens? How am I going to do this, right?
Right.
But I was 22.
Yeah.
I didn't know any better, and I needed a job.
Right.
And so that one sounded like a good job because it was kind of like it's at the same apartment we were living at. It was very reasonable hours. I got to like kind of walk around in my like shorts and flip
Shorts,
flops.
flip flops.
Yeah,
Right.
right. And I'm like, I was making 550 bucks a week. I was like, good.
Yeah.
You know,
Not
I was
bad.
22, living at home with mama, and I was like, it's not bad, right?
Right.
Um, Hanan realized who I was before I knew. And that's most times with mentors and with people that like kind of can pour into you, is that they oftentimes realize, and not like just out of the goodness of their heart. Sometimes with Hanan, especially, is like, I can use this kid to help me run my business and create freedom of time for myself.
Right.
So it kind of worked out, right? And then I was once alone, like once we took over the management business, the show was running.
Right.
And so I didn't really have too much time to ask myself questions, right? I was 22. I had a loan that was $11,335. And I
Right.
remember that specifically because
Hmm.
for years I went to the bank, and I bank at Bank of America, and the loan was with BB&T Bank.
Is that a
And
local bank down there or something?
yeah,
Or
it's a southeast bank.
yeah.
And some months I had the money at the last possible day that you could pay it. So
Right.
I would go to Bank of America, withdraw cash, drive up the street to BB&T and deposit cash directly into my loan account, because that's when I had the money.
Here you go. Take it. Put it in there.
Right? Like, you know how to give you the grace period, like your loan is passed after a certain day.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how it was for a very long time.
Yeah.
And like I want to share that because you see now, and you have no idea, but for the longest time, I was what I define as comfortably uncomfortable. Meaning, I had this loan and this bills due, and sometimes I had no money. But I know the concepts of what I was doing were the right things. And so I was like, eventually this is going to pay off.
Right.
I don't know why, I don't know when, but I'm going to stay comfortably uncomfortable. And eventually it's going to pay off. And it did.
Right.
In the process, I did a bunch of other shit.
Yeah. Why don't we unpack some of those other things
Yeah.
and we'll sort of round it back.
So being comfortably uncomfortable, I needed money. And getting into real estate, I learned about all the different sides and shapes of real estate and all the different things that you can do. So I've done everything from wholesaling to fix and flips to real estate syndications to buying property with other people's money. I've done it all, right? the one thing that I learned, especially when it comes to, for example, wholesaling. Wholesaling is a great example of it. Is the grail that people are like, this is where you start. This is where you start with no money. This is where you start with little money. This is where you can do the hustle, the grind, all very true things. It just takes a very long time. And so what I lacked as being like a visionary dreamer kind of personality, I lacked the discipline of the long-term effort with little reward. 1, 2, I was already comfortably uncomfortable with money.
Right.
And so I didn't have the runway needed to sustain what is needed to get to success.
Right.
When it comes to wholesaling, when it comes to all those type of things. And that's why I tell to a lot of people that come to our real estate meetup and they want to tell me, I'm going to start doing wholesaling. I'm like, great. How much money do you have? How many marketing campaigns do you have? Well, I'm going to hit 3,000 people month 1. I'm like, great. Do you have the money to sustain those 3,000 people for the next 6 months, 8 months, 10 months, 12 months? Oh, no, I don't. I'm like, okay, great. Maybe I would suggest shrinking that list to 1,000 people,
right,
and hitting them for 6 months, right?
Yep.
So one of the biggest things that I learned, and it's very counterintuitive in a sense, is really embodying that less is more when it comes to like how wide you spread your attention. Because you think you can and you can, but there is always a finite amount of energy that your brain has in terms of attention and in terms of quality of attention.
Right.
That can go into something. And so actually what I've learned, and this is what I shared with you back in Miami a while back, is that once I started kind of walking back on a lot of the other things that I was doing, right? I tried to grow a long-term property management company at the same time I was growing a short-term property management company. The moment I started clearing out my plate of a lot of the extra stuff that I was doing, the universe started responding to me being in alignment with the one thing that I was supposed to do. And life got easier.
Can I ask you, so obviously you're, as you described, you had a lot of sort of different things happening in your life, all real estate related. Of course, they can be exciting because we all love real estate. And everyone's got the grind. Like I'm running from something towards another thing, and real estate's my vehicle in some way, shape, or form a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
And, what I experienced was pretty close to burnout, in my own life. And I have my own mechanisms now for gauging, am I going to continue to do something or offload it?
Mm-hmm.
For you internally, what were some of those like feelings or thoughts that you were able to use to make some decisive choices over, I'm going to double down on this and I'm going to offload this? What did that decision tree look like for you?
That's an interesting question. So I don't think I can take credit for any of that. So a lot of it was my wife. And I had this kind of saying now that I ask myself as people like bring me opportunities or ask me to do things is, what would Tasha say? Or what would Tasha ask? And I tend to be like a cup half full kind of person. So I never really say no to people. I have a really hard time saying no to people. And so where a lot of it came for me was just a rude awakening of the fact that my implementer in life, which is Tasha, was like, I cannot take on all this extra shit that is not giving us anything. Right? Super bluntly, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can't. So either you choose what you want to do. And I think she's like, I think this is what we should do. This is where we're the best at. Either you choose that or you find the money to hire other people to do the rest.
Right.
Because I also learned in life that if you have enough money, you don't have any problems. And not from a place of like, money solves everything, but from a place that money does solve things that involve other people. So if you have enough money, you can hire people. If you have enough money, you can invest in systems, you can invest in technology. If you have enough money, you can do all of the real estate business at the same time because you're just the architect and you have a bunch of engineers underneath you that just get it done. Right. And then you just get a report at the end of the day or at the end of the week. And they're like, this is how far we went. This is everything we accomplished. What next?
Right. And I bet, so what I had to kind of learn, so my sort of spirit person is Kim, she helps with that as well.
Yeah.
But then also just internally, and I think this will probably resonate with you too. I just started making it super simple for myself. And I looked at every activity, and one of two things could happen with that activity. Either it energized me, it got me fired up, it made me want to stay up till midnight to do whatever this was, or it drained me, and I wouldn't let there be an in-between. It does one of these two things, and anything that drains me, I am offloading as quickly as humanly possible.
Yeah.
That for me was my sort of internal mechanism. And I bet you probably can relate to that a little bit too.
Yeah.
When something sucks the life out of you.
100%. And the next evolution of that piece for me, especially lately, has been understanding what are those things that I'm saying yes to because they give me significance, right? That make me feel good, but are they in alignment with my greater goal? Right. Which is a more difficult conversation to have with yourself. Because then it's like, am I doing this because it's necessary? Or am I doing this because it makes me feel good? Like makes my ego self.
Right.
Right. And then really being able to be mindful of there is nothing wrong with doing stuff that makes your ego self feel good. But are these things happening to the detriment of something else that you should be doing, right? That would be in supporting your greater goal, right? And that's a daily exercise in just awareness for me, because sometimes I like doing things that make me feel good, right? Like doing a podcast makes me feel good. Doing coaching calls in the STR Secret community makes me feel good, right? Does it yield the most advantage to my team and to my dream with Tasha and to our goals as a business? Yes and no, right? But there has to be a balance. But you also can't confuse being busy doing things like that make you feel good with being on purpose or being efficient or being effective with your time. Right. Because that's when you start kind of falling into a trap of, I am so busy, I feel great, but the business is now changing. Right. Why is that?
As you were starting to acquire more of the units at the courtside villas and you're kind of getting your feet wet with all these different sort of disciplines within real estate, what were some of the maybe roadblocks that you had to work through? Because I mean, this essentially happened right over several years.
Yeah.
Correct? That's quite a bit of time.
Yeah.
How did you sort of develop and grow as a person? Maybe what kind of education did you seek out, or what were some of the lessons that resonated with you most that helped you really start to think about, like, nope, this is not for me, and this is?
So a lot of what I learned is what I said earlier, that you can do everything you want to do, but you have to have, there's a very finite amount of energy that you have, and the people that support you also have a finite amount of energy. Right. So understanding that sometimes you cannot, and that's more and more your job as a leader is to understand how full the plate of everybody else around you is. Because there is no reason to keep saying yes to things and overstressing your team and overbearing your team and overburdening your team if there is no end in sight. Right. So a lot of the learning for me was because I had a mentor that used to say yes and figure it out later, which is a very good kind of concept, but it's also a very terrible kind of concept as well.
It could be dangerous.
It's very dangerous, right? Because then you always get in the mode of saying yes and figuring it out later. you will figure it out later. I do believe that, right? And I do believe that the universe is rigged in my favor, and that like life is always happening in my favor also, right? So nothing bad ever happens. It's either a lesson or an opportunity, but there's always a silver lining in it at the end of the road for me. But that also comes with having to understand that if you say yes and try to figure it out later, and the people around you are not able to say yes, then ultimately all the shit falls back on you.
That's right. That's a great
right?
point.
So really be mindful of, you can say yes and you can figure it out later, but what does your support system look like, and can they handle it? Right. So one for me was really owning the fact that like I sometimes said yes from a place of scarcity more than from a place of abundance. And it was a very tricky thing, because it was a perceived abundance that made me say yes. But in reality, it's because I didn't think that just doing what I was doing was going to get me to where I wanted to go.
Right.
So a lot of that has been that. In terms of education, like proper education, more than education in and of itself, has been putting myself around people and around rooms of people that are doing bigger things than me, but not exponentially bigger, a couple steps bigger.
Right.
Because the exponentially bigger kind of goes the other way. You're like, holy shit. How is that possible?
Scarcity again. Right.
Yeah. How is that possible? Because you missed the steps in between. Right. And so I'm like, the other thing with this wealth journey is that, again, everything is possible, but that doesn't make it achievable. Right.
Or enjoyable.
Exactly. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and there's great examples of like running, for example, right? Like running the mile. It is possible. There's people that do it. It is possible. And you understand that it's just all about running and training. But from you to go running a 10-minute mile to a 4-minute mile, there is a lot that has to happen. And it's not just running, right? And it's not even just running the same distance every day. You know, it's not like I'm going to run a mile every day, and by the end of the year, I'm going to get to a 4-minute mile.
Right.
It's not that. It's not that simple. Right. So in really owning and really understanding and really learning to enjoy the process.
Yep.
And learning to enjoy that, like, life is perfect and the moments you're going through are perfect for where you are right now.
Right.
And sometimes you can expedite it.
Right.
You can fast forward it. You can make it happen sooner. Can I make it happen faster? It's not going to grow more than it needs to grow right now. Right. And one of my mentors always used to say, look, if you think that a flower is perfect only when it blooms, you're missing the perfection of the process. Because a flower is perfect the entire way. If not, it wouldn't bloom.
Right.
But so often we get a seed of an idea. Maybe you're at a conference, maybe you're somewhere, and you're like, this resonates with me. This sounds right. And you plant it. And then you water it. And a couple of days later, you go back and you dig it out, and you look for it. It's like, are you growing yet? And the seed is like, I was about to. Are you going to cover me again and water me again and like just leave me alone for a second? Right. And so it's really owning that and understanding that, like, what you see now with me, like if you listen to our show, if you listen to me talk even right now, you're getting this me now, but you have no idea of what was or what I'm currently going through. And that doesn't make me worse or better than you. It's just my own reality to my own story.
Right.
And your story is just the same. And you don't have to change it. You don't have to rush it. You just have to be comfortably uncomfortable for a little bit to just see what happens.
One thing I want to share with the listeners is uh, the application of these concepts through the discussion you and I had in Miami. So
Yeah.
to share with the listeners, E and I was fortunate enough to meet E in Miami. Kim and I were down there for the short-term rental wealth retreat, is what I think it was called. It was pretty intimate. There was like 100 people there. And at some point, I think Kim found you and Mike, said, my husband, Dave, loves real estate. He's doing it full time and he's all over the place. Like have a discussion with Dave at some point if you can.
Mm-hmm.
It was really helpful because going into that conference, you should have seen my goal board. It was
Mm-hmm.
ridiculous. It was unfocused and it was ridiculous. And I had this feeling of the more I'm doing, the more I'm accomplishing, and that just wasn't true. And I was getting pretty burnt out. And I didn't really understand how I was going to accomplish any of my goals. And I had too many goals. And you and I had a super blunt and amazing conversation where we were down by the pool and I explained everything to E, even though he already knew from talking to Kim. And you said you really just said one word to me. You looked me dead in the eye and you're like, why? Why?
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't answer that. A super simple question. You should always know your why. And I couldn't answer that. And it was, for me, it was amazing because obviously after that, you and I talked about each of the different things I was doing in more detail and kind of sort of brainstormed ways of, thinking about what it was I really wanted to do. But I have felt like for me over the last 4 to 5 months, however long it's been, I've seen miles more progress in the things I actually want to accomplish. And the things I don't want to work on, it doesn't mean I'm not doing them anymore. They're just much more contained and they have their own place and they don't spill into other things. And I've been able to lean on other people to pick up certain pieces that I no longer want to be doing every day or leaning more on partnerships. But it's that application of really understanding, what is your why, what's energizing you, and like what's the goal, right? At the end of the day, real estate's cool or whatever you want to work on is cool to you or to whoever. But if it's not in alignment with your goals and at some point, right, your partner's goals, then what's the point? Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And again, that's a what would Tasha say question to me.
right.
Right. And it's really like you owning that why and the question why and not to be like pessimistic about life, but anytime an opportunity comes your way, why? There is this great property that is already cash flowing a bunch of money and the seller wants to sell it. Why?
Right.
If it's such a great deal, why?
Yeah.
Right. And understanding that like asking why doesn't mean you don't do something, but you bring the like awareness of it into the question, into the situation. And we're doing a 7-figure boardroom call last week. And also another thing that we were talking about is when you have these great ideas and these great opportunities and you're fully convinced that it's a good call for you, argue it the other way to your significant other. Right? So Kim, I have this great property, this great opportunity. I think we should buy it. But let me tell you why we shouldn't buy it. Can you convince your partner that it's not a good idea? Or does your partner still see your good idea and your good realizations and your good whatever it is from the beginning? Because again, guys, like I think also there is a part of the wealth journey that very much becomes about saying no to the majority of things and saying yes to the right things and saying yes to just the really, 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 really right things. Because I think, and again, going back to my own personal journey, there were a lot of times early on that I was swinging for the fences And now sometimes I still have that wanting to, but I have to remember that I'm not the same person anymore. And I don't have the same need to expose or to put myself out in risk or to put myself out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
It's similar to you guys now, right? Like your co-hosting business is working, this is working, and you're like, do I want to start a whole other business with somebody else who's going to put a bunch of extra time and extra pressure on my life and take me away from Kim, take me away from the kids?
Right.
Why?
Like, what's the why?
Why? Is this really going to get me closer to ultimately like retiring Kim and getting sure that me and Kim have more time to spend together with the kids?
Right.
Shit. If I ask myself that question, maybe it doesn't. Right? And understanding that life is infinitely abundant.
Right.
And so if it's meant for you, it'll come back. I don't believe anymore in the once in a lifetime opportunity, because I've had a lot of once in a lifetime opportunities that I really fucked up on.
Right.
And somehow they came back in a different way, shape, or form. So then I'm like, is it once in a lifetime opportunity? Or is it just life? And life constantly gives you opportunities. So that's been a lot more of my space lately. Right. And especially right now with where the economy is, where the market is, I really want your listeners, especially if you have listeners that are like eager to get started, just be extra cautious. Because again, like one thing remains true about real estate is you make money when you buy. And that's one of the rules that a lot of my mentors in real estate have always kind of told me. And there is a lot of people that reach out to Mike. There's a lot of people that reach out to me. They're like, I bought this thing, it's not making money. What do I do? And I'm really, unfortunately, unless you have money to carry it and infinite time.
Right.
In the short term, there's really very little we can do if you bought a shit deal.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Because that is the other thing about real estate is like, once you add the component of time, all real estate looks great. If you plan on holding something 10, 12, 15 years, we're all geniuses, right? Like whatever you bought 10 years ago, we all look amazing now. But that's nothing of our own. That's just the natural progression of values of real estate. And historically, going back into this country, especially looking back over time, you look any 10-year period, you can't lose. The problem is if you buy shitty in the middle of a shitty time, and then you try to exit in the same time,
there's going to be a loss. There's going to
be that's different, right? And that's the one thing with all investments, unless you look at investments in a company that goes bankrupt, and then you're like, the company is no longer there. That's the thing that's nice with real estate, is like it's always going to be there.
Yep.
And you'll make a profit if you hold through it. Eventually, you will.
Right.
But the thing is, like, in a podcast that talks about financial freedom like ours does, eventually you will. It's not what people want to hear.
Right.
But it's also the reality of life, right? It's the reality of most investments.
Right.
Is that if you have time and you have some money to weather the storm, or if you're willing to be comfortably uncomfortable for a little bit,
or a long time, depending on how bad that deal,
how bad you buy, right? But it's the truth. I have a mentor that says if you don't cash flow from a property at all, but you just cover your bills,
right,
you're still making money, because long term the house is going to be paid off,
right,
and it's going to be yours, and you're good. Is that what you want to hear when you start getting started investing in real estate? Not really.
Why not? Right.
But it's also part of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it all depends.
One thing that you said that I think is incredibly valuable and I don't want us to gloss over it, is that I truly believe in something you said, that there's no such thing as a once in a lifetime opportunity when it comes to real estate. And the reason I think that's so important is because I think people use the once in a lifetime lever or excuse to allow themselves to get unfocused once again. So maybe
Mhm.
they'll, their goal is wholesaling, or it's whatever, building their co-hosting portfolio, or maybe they're 100% all in on multifamily, but they want to do another discipline as well. And everyone sort of says, "Oh, I'm not buying right now unless a good deal comes." And it's like, no, either you're buying right now or you're not. Because if you
Mhm.
half-ass either of those, you're not going to accomplish your goal of not buying, and you're definitely not going to buy a good property.
Mhm.
And and so I think that that deserves its own place in all of this, is that in real estate, things can be built, they can be bought, they can be traded, they can be rebuilt, they can be redesigned. There's no such thing as a once in a lifetime real estate opportunity, at least
Mhm.
not that I've seen. Um, and I think that's super important. And the other thing is, and this is a little bit off topic, but yeah, like, don't buy a shitty deal. There's no reason to buy a shitty deal. There's so many people, either free or paid education out there to help you not buy a shitty deal. And E or Mike, or the most amazing co-host in the whole wide world, cannot save your property if it was a really bad deal, and there's ways to avoid it. So people
Yeah.
can call me or E or anyone else to help you avoid that, but just don't do
Yeah.
it.
100%. And also, so we had Tyler Kuhn on our show. He's an agent from
Yeah,
the North Carolina area.
right.
You're an agent. I'm an agent. A big thing that your listeners should look out for in choosing an agent, if you're not an agent yourself, it's really be wary of the people you choose and what are their financial incentives. And I don't mean this to like talk shit about our industry, but also I'm talking a little bit of shit about our industry at the same time, because there's a lot of agents out there that are living paycheck to paycheck,
Yeah.
and they will advise clients to buy anything. Again, it's your own fault as a buyer for doing it, but at the same time, be very mindful of who is in your corner. I tell my clients all the time, I'm very blessed and fortunate that real estate sales for me is just a way that I fund my life. So the fun shit that I do, my addiction to buying real estate, all gets funded from me selling properties.
Right.
But I will never sell you something or never let you buy anything that I wouldn't want to buy myself, or that I wouldn't want to manage myself.
Right.
So be very wary. And if you
Mhm.
are on the more expert side of things already, and you understand how to run numbers, and you're going to a new market that you're not super familiar with, find a shitty deal and send it to your agent, supposed agent. And this is something that Tyler said, and be like, should I buy this? See what happens.
Right.
Right? Because it's a very easy way. And again, guys, like, being in a rush to achieve financial freedom is the one sure way that you're going to fuck yourself.
Royally.
And that's the one thing that I learned about myself, is that every time I was in a rush, or I was thinking I found the golden goose with the golden eggs, it was mostly a chicken, and it didn't make any eggs. Like, you know what I mean? It was actually a rooster. Like, it didn't make eggs at all.
The meat
It,
didn't
like,
even taste good.
there was nothing. Like, you know what I'm saying? It was just nothing. And I could have just
Right.
waited and waited and waited, because the other reality for me, especially going back to the concept that your energy feels infinite, but it's not, is that anytime you shift your attention away from something into something else, this something else, unless you have a team and a business around it that supports it and grows it, it's not going to grow.
Right. Right.
And ask me how I know that.
How do you know that?
Personal experience. right? The years the villas did the worst was 2016. And it's because I thought that's when I got my real estate license. And I was like, I'm going to go full on into real estate. I was calling every day and everything else.
Right.
And the villas did the worst that they ever did in the 12 years that I ran them. Because I wasn't focused.
Right.
And I didn't have the people around me. And I didn't have the people responding to clients. And I didn't have the bandwidth to do the banter and the chatting and the talking up to people. And my business suffered.
Right. And then on top of that, you probably didn't make as much progress as you were hoping to as an agent because you just had
None.
too much happening, right?
None.
Yeah.
Call for months. And other than the fuck you, I'm gonna kill you if you call me again. This is really the first time I call you. I swear I'd never called you again. You are all the same, you pieces of shit. Other than that, I didn't get anything.
Right.
Nothing.
Right.
Nothing.
Yeah.
I really worked on my. Once a call like that comes, you're like, I don't want to do this anymore. And then you have to still dial for the rest of the day.
Right.
That teaches you something, you know what I mean? And that teaches also that, like, some people are salespeople. Some people are salespeople in different ways.
Yep.
And I'm not that kind of salesperson. I'm not the calling car salesman. That's not me. Like, that's not my kind of sales.
Right.
But I wouldn't know until I tried it.
There was a I'll end up putting the episode in the show notes when we get to it, but there is an episode on your podcast where you talked about that a little bit more. And you kind of said, you know, I'm never going to be the dude in the suit and tie. You were like, I sold way more real estate when I dressed as me and showed up as me to an appointment of some kind than when I did the shirt and tie and suit.
Yeah.
And had a
Because
script.
it didn't feel good. It didn't feel right.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like it didn't feel me.
Right.
And the thing is, most people, all people, can feel you not being you.
Right.
And then they feel like you're trying to sell them.
Mm-hmm.
And then people don't want to be sold.
Right.
People want to work with people they like.
Let me ask you this, you know, as you sort of discovered this about yourself, and obviously you've been teaching others how to like dial in their focus and things of that nature. Have you found that achieving your goals has, I don't want to say easier, but maybe it's a little bit more fulfilling, or it's a little bit like you can make more progress towards your goals, or even allow yourself to make bigger goals since learning that about yourself?
So what I did learn about goals and my own goals, it's one, be ready for when you do accomplish your goals. Because especially if you've been in a place where you really have worked on them for a very long time, it's going to be kind of anticlimactic. Because the reality of it is what changes is who you are over time. And your life has changed over time. Then the moment you do the big thing, nothing changes.
Right.
And so if you're waiting for that to happen, to feel amazing, I've had moments like that. Like when I bought the villas, when I bought the last unit of the villas, it didn't feel like anything.
Right.
And actually, I felt like shit. Because I was just like, I've been dreaming about this for 12 years. But along those 12 years, there was never a moment that I didn't know that this was going to happen. And so when it happened, I knew it was going to happen. So it didn't feel as exciting as I thought it was going to be.
Right.
So that's one of the things that I learned. Two, it's really like, and Mike had this great quote at the end of the Nashville conference, which is kind of like, life will give you what you ask of it. And so whatever amount you ask of it, that's what life is going to give you. Right. And so really owning that component. And now I'm going back and rereading Who Know How. And so as a leader, as a CEO of your own life, it's really owning that component of you can dream it how big you want it. But then the next question is not, okay, how do I do it? It's who do I need to get there? And really learning to like be religious with that. Who do I need? And protecting your time and stay in a place of highest and best use of your time.
Right.
And also teaching it and supporting and calling out your people, especially your leadership tier, like your top 3 people around you,
Right.
to do the same thing. So that, I don't know if that answers your questions, but that is, yeah. So that's kind of like what I've learned about myself.
Well, and it gives some application to it, you know?
Yeah. You know, one, it's however big you want it, you can have it. It's not how you do it, it's who you do it with. And to truly get there, you have to believe it the entire time. So when you get there, you just got to enjoy it for the execution of it, but not expect it to change anything.
Right. Man, that's deep and it's awesome. I mean that everything that you've just laid out here, in my opinion, is super, super powerful, right? Because especially in something like real estate, we all have big goals, we all have big dreams. A lot of people's goals are very much the same, um, but no miracle happens once those goals are necessarily achieved. I'm sure there's some relief, and maybe relief is probably a good way to put it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that your world is going to change. It might just have a new challenge or a new thing, something like that. Um, as we start to round out the hour here, usually what I ask guests is there anything you'd leave the audience with? But I feel like we've been leaving the audience with nuggets for the last hour. So I'll let you use your discretion at that, or take the last few minutes to share anything you'd like to share, any advice for folks. But this has been an episode filled with fantastic advice that I think can help a lot of people in their journey.
Yeah. Kind of more of the same. It's like not to beat, like, what's the saying? Not to beat a dead horse, but like one, it's really what you said, actually, like asking yourself why. And me and Mike had this game at the beginning of asking the 7 layers of why. So you just ask why, and then you respond, and you're like, why? What are the responses? And then why, and why, and why, right? So almost embody your little kid self.
Yeah.
But why? Like, you know what I mean? Like really live that. If you have a kid, that may not be as fun for you because you live it on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
But it's the truth. 2, one of the things that I didn't talk about that was hugely beneficial in my life is really upgrading my group of friends, upgrading the people that I surround myself with. And we're very fortunate that nowadays you're not necessarily required to hang out with people that are local to you. All of my best friends, all of my favorite people in the world are not necessarily local to me.
Right.
And you have a little phone that you can call them and reach out to. Because also you need to find yourself in a room where you're craving for a bigger life. It's not only understood, but it's also shared.
Right.
And because I remember like I joined M1, which was March to a Million. And I remember the first time that I was like, I have a $40,000 bill coming up between operating costs, mortgage, sublease payments, and everything else. And somebody else being like, oh yeah, man, me too. I'm like, I have no money. It's like, yeah, me neither. I'm like, okay, but we're going to make it. And we're like, yeah, we always do. And realizing how fucking awesome that was. Right. That for the first time I had somebody else that like heard that and they were in like champagne problems. You know what I mean? Like, what? Like, right. I don't know where my next paycheck comes from. I'm like, I get it. This is my version of that.
Right.
And really understanding that, like, if you feel inappropriate almost to talk to your friends about certain dreams that you have, you don't need smaller dreams, you need different friends. And I'm not saying like cut out all your friends,
Right.
But be very mindful of kind of what you said earlier too. Like, how do you feel after you hang out with somebody?
Right.
Do you feel energized? Do you feel drained? Do you feel like you can reach a higher self of you? Or do you feel like they're trying to bring you down to your older self that you've been working your ass to not be anymore, right?
100%.
And that's difficult because sometimes that's your family, right? And understand that like they don't mean bad, but you changing you makes them uncomfortable about who they are themselves.
That's right.
And there is nothing you can do about it. And you don't have to change them. And you don't have to convince them also. Because for me, that was another component that I was like, I need these people to see how I see it.
Right.
Sometimes you don't. Like sometimes, they can't see it. And you need to be okay with them not seeing it. With you not sharing that side of your life, if you want to keep them in your life, or with you saying goodbye, if you need to be able to share that side of your life and they're not.
Right.
They're not there. And that's it, man. Like I can keep ranting. That's another part of my personality. If you give me a microphone and I'm talking, I'm enjoying myself, I talk a lot. And actually feedback that somebody sent me is like, honestly, man, I love your show, but I wish you talked less. I'm like, bro, me too. Like, I swear to God, I wish I talked less. I know my wife wishes I talk less sometimes. I am trying. It's actually a genuine effort that I make to talk less, but I get excited. And my first instinct is to share and talk. And it's just who I am,
I think, this interview, it energized me. So you don't have to talk less, man. You can,
I appreciate that.
We'll chat in Nashville in a couple of months. We'll talk all
Yeah.
sorts of this stuff, but I really want to thank you for coming on the show today.
My pleasure.
Kim, you were missed. We'll somehow plug you in somehow, some way into this show.
Always.
But honestly, that was massively helpful for me. It was like a full-on clinic for me. And I think for a lot of our listeners, this episode is really going to help people start to truly think about what it is that they want out of this industry and how to start thinking about achieving it. So, thank you. We're going to have a bunch of links to your show, links to your villas, all that good stuff, your Instagram in the show notes. And just thank you, man. Thank you.
My pleasure, brother. Thank you for having me. Kim, you were missed. But hopefully we did you proud. We tried to stay focused as much as possible. I know our implementers want that for us. So yeah, but It's been a pleasure. I look forward to seeing you guys. And then again, any of your listeners need anything, feel free to reach out.
We'll have that contact info right in the show notes. Thank you.
This podcast is brought to you by the 5-Star Co-Host, an Airbnb management and consulting company that helps homeowners turn their properties into passive income streams through short-term rentals. Do you want to turn your vacation house into a passive income stream? Then look no further. The 5-Star Co-Host has served over 1,000 guests in several Airbnb properties and in varying markets. The 5-Star Co-Host is at the vanguard of the short-term rental industry by leveraging technology and systems to maximize the guest experience while achieving high revenue for owners. Get a free home analysis by emailing the 5-Star Co-Host at gmail.com. That's the 5-Star Co-Host at gmail.com. THEFIVESTARCOHOST at gmail.com.